welcome everybody. Thank you very much for coming. This is the latest of a series, an ongoing series that has been going on at least since last January, focused on the ongoing genocide, legal occupation, and apartheid in Palestine, and on the Israeli war of aggression in Lebanon, and on related struggles beyond. So we've had a number of events that I know many of you have been to, and we will continue having events like this at least once per month. If you are not looped into the various channels that we have to announce them, just talk to me or Aya or any of the others in the audience who look like they are nodding right now. We're extremely lucky to have here today Mona Harb, visiting from American University in Beirut, where she's a professor of urban studies and politics. Mona is the co-founder and the research lead of the Beirut Urban Lab. Hopefully, maybe we could annex it and make it Barcelona Urban Lab as well. Her work focuses on a variety of issues related to contested sovereignty, urban activism, and how people make collective lives within fragmented localities. She's written several books, at least one of which we have in the library here, on leisurely Islam, and another which is in French on Hezbollah in Beirut, which we should make sure we get to the library. Her work is obviously of great interest to all of us who've been trying to organize in solidarity with the struggles going on in Palestine and Lebanon. And it's also equally of great interest to a number of us who are working on questions of cities and mobility within spaces, within cities, urban spaces, things that link directly to her work at the lab. So the conference, in addition to being hosted, or the talk, in addition to being hosted by the collective UPF in solidarity with Palestine and the Red Universitaria por Palestina, it's also being funded by the Gender and Inequalities Research Group and the Climate Change and Human Mobility Project. So without cutting in any more to Mona's time, I present to you Mona Harb, and let's give her a big round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the generous introduction and the invitation to John and to Aya. It's a pleasure to be here. When Aya and John reached out during the war, in the middle of the war, we agreed that I would come when things were a bit better. I don't know what bit better means these days, but I think it's all relative. So thanks a lot. I was asked to share the work we do at the Beirut Urban Lab, and particularly how we worked on critical mapping and visualization. So I speak on behalf of my colleagues and the team at the lab in this presentation. I will start with a brief history and overview of what is the Beirut Urban Lab and how it was established, very much because what we do today is informed by this history and our mission and vision. So the Beirut Urban Lab has been established in 2018 as a collaborative and interdisciplinary research space at the American University of Beirut, a nonprofit university in the heart of the city. We produce scholarship on urban transformation, and we document these processes relying a lot on critical mapping and visualization, but also on critical inquiry and I would say classical academic scholarship. We intervene as interlocutors and contributors to ongoing debates about urbanization, historically and contemporary urbanization, and we very much position ourselves as part of the global South in that as a positionality, I would say. We are also very much linked to an ecosystem of change makers, especially urban and environmental activists with whom we are connected at various levels. Professionals, reflective practitioners, academics, philanthropists, NGO workers, everyone who's driven and committed to making cities more just, inclusive and viable in Lebanon. We are, you see the 4 images of the co-directors, Mona Fawaz, Hawaid Al-Harisi, Ahmad Gharbi, and myself. We each run a track of investigation that you can read. I don't know if you can read it here. It's too small probably, but you can check on our website and know a little bit more about, I would say, our thematic interests in relation to urban transformations and city making. I'm mainly the person who asks questions about who produces the built environment, how are cities produced, who are the actors who produce cities, how do they connect to each other, how do they connect or not to the state, who governs, how are things governed, how are things not governed. So all the questions related to governance, institutions, actors, across scales are thematics that I privilege in my inquiries. We started working together in the Department of Architecture and Design where we teach, which has now become a School of Architecture and Design. We started most importantly in the aftermath of the 2006 war on Lebanon, another episode of war, where we grouped and worked on very different localities, trying to advocate for just and viable recovery. At the time, the concept of recovery was not central in our work, so we worked more on the concept of reconstruction. Myself and Mona Fawaz worked at the time on the reconstruction of Harb, the stronghold of Hezbollah, which we were very familiar with, building on our work in our PhD. And our colleagues worked on towns and localities in South Lebanon, on Leili, on Ait al-Shab, on Ait al-Shab, Leili, and forgot what was the third. I forgot. It's been 25 years. We also worked together on themes that we thought are important for the city. So we did work on its public spaces and on security, on urban security. And we published those in newspapers in Arabic and in English that we disseminated as supplements to newspapers at the time. They are all available in PDF on our website if you're interested, except the book that Huwaid al-Harisi co-edited on lessons in post-war reconstruction, which is published with Routledge and that you can check online, I think, not in open access. These are samples of the newspapers that we've done on the public and on urban security. We typically work these products with our students, so we embed these themes in our courses, we assign assignments on these themes, and we take the best, I would say, work from the students and we publish them in these newspapers. And we invite guest contributors to reflect visually and writing in a variety of ways. And we do a lot of public debates that follow these publications to discuss the issues that are in these publications, trying to create to disseminate a narrative on, at the time, urban security or the public. I'm happy to go back to any of these in the Q&A, but I want to move through this quickly to get to the topic of today's. We are also organizers of the City Debates Conference, which has become a landmark conference in Beirut for people interested in the urban. This is part of a course that we teach in the Masters in Urban Planning and Policy and Master in Urban Design at the department. So we've transformed this seminar requirement into this international conference that brings people on a variety of thematics every year. So this year it's happening in mid-April on the theme of critical mapping and visualization. It's organized by Ahmed Agharbiye, and it will discuss the methodologies through which we've produced our data platforms over the years. Again, City Debates has a website, and you can check previous editions with links to abstracts and to any publication that came out of it. Yeah. These are the labbers, as we call them. We are housed within AUB in this in the Beirut Urban Lab office, and this is a picture of most of us during one of the city debates, just to give you a little bit of idea of the team and the students who are often associated to the type of work we do. Our flagship project is the Beirut Built Environment Database, which is a production that there was an image here that is not, but I'll tell the story. So the Beirut Urban Lab was established in 2018, very much in the aftermath of the experience we had as a group contributing to the municipal election campaign of Beirut Madinati in 2016, which was also very inspired by the experience of Podemos at the time, and where we talked a lot with the Podemos representatives. Some of them came to Beirut to try to learn how to municipalize our politics and urban politics in the city. So part of the Beirut Madinati effort at the time was also to produce an urban program for the city, which we were very involved in as individuals in the Beirut Urban Lab before its creation. So as individuals, I would say at AUB, as urban activists and scholars. And we wrote a 10-point program for the city of Beirut. And while doing this, we were very much, I would say, handicapped by the lack of knowledge about the city, by the fact that we don't have even a base map about the city, a reliable base map where we would know how many buildings we have, how many people live there, the names of the streets, the locales, the open spaces, etc. So after the experience of Beirut Madinati, we regrouped and decided to institutionalize this knowledge that we have about the city in the Urban Lab. And we got a grant at the time from the Ford Foundation based on a proposal where we pitched that we want to produce the space map for the city because it doesn't exist. And this is like the ground rule for mobilization and collective action to know the city, to produce this knowledge. And we produced the Beirut base map that you see here, which is available in open access. It took us 4 years to build this base map. And we decided to house it in the Urban Lab at AUB, awaiting hopeful times where we would retake the municipality and establish a city planning unit for the city of Beirut, where this knowledge would be ready to be actually built on. So in that sense, the Beirut Urban Lab was very much produced with that activist mindset in mind, that while awaiting the next round of struggle and mobilization, we would do this work, we would prepare for this work. So the Beirut Built Environment Database is a platform on ArcGIS that can be downloaded in open access by anyone who's interested in working on Beirut. So it's downloaded by a lot of our students at AUB and beyond, and all the universities who work on Beirut. And we have statistics on that I'm not going to share here, but we know that it's very useful as a tool for many. It has a lot of layers that are available also in open access on the building attributes, their height, their age, on the lot number, so you can actually know what's the lot number and located geographically. We have also data on developers. This is not an open access because it's linked to the research project of my colleague Mona Fawaz, but we have data on how Beirut grew over time through real estate speculation, which neighborhoods were built by who, which neighborhoods were built in infraction of the rules of the built environment, and who are the developers who did that. So we also publish a lot of research in relation to this data platform. We also have a layer on water that highlights the pollution level of water across the city that was developed in partnership with a civil engineer at AUB. So it gives you an idea about the type of work we can do with these platforms. Now I'll move to how the lab, because the lab was created in 2018, and since 2019, Lebanon has endured series of interlocking crises, like what some people are referring to as polycrisis, that are all intersecting with each other and that build on that legacy. There are very much the results, and there will continue to be more and more crises because we have legacies, I would say, of crisis since the Civil War and even before. So what I'm presenting today is more a snapshot of these last 5 years or 6 years even. We could continue up till today because it's still ongoing. And I will show you the way we have been reacting to these crises as a lab. So I'm not being able to show everything. So I don't know if it didn't, because there was a slide before this on the uprising. Before I go through the COVID one. It's okay. I'll talk about it, but there were nice images on it. So in 2019, we had the notorious or famous uprisings in Lebanon that were most of the Lebanese mobilized across Lebanon. So as a lab, what we've done is we stopped teaching for several weeks and we did teach-ins in downtown Beirut. So we took our classes to downtown Beirut and we took the students with us. And we taught a lot about urban transformations of the city. We were in the middle of a city that was gentrified by a private real estate company. And the students did not know what existed in this place prior to the Solidaire project. So we took them around on tours of the historical landmarks that remained. We also took them on tours of the sites where historical landmarks were destroyed. We narrated the Civil War based on their request. We taught about gentrification. We taught about real estate development. We taught about public spaces. So we used that opportunity of the uprising to also politicize further and link politics to the urban for the students and actually all the citizens who were in the street. There was 10 teaching on the legal. We were the 10 teaching on the urban. There was another 10 teaching more about the history. So we were part of these efforts and teach-ins. The pandemic came very much to the rescue of the sectarian political system in Lebanon. At the time, there was also very violent counter-revolutionary forces that repressed that uprising. So we had to stay home and think about what to do in the aftermath of these uprising and also in experiencing the COVID like everyone else. So what we did at the time is we started a desk research where we built a database of all the responses that the state conducted as a response to the pandemic. And at the time, the deep state remobilized very quickly through the vaccination campaigns and the hygiene and the medical kits that they were distributing to people. And so we started going through the media and counting like who has a tent here, who has a quarantine center there, who is distributing these kits. And we saw how the state repositioned itself very quickly at the time. We did another ArcGIS platform where we counted these, what we call the territories of sectarianism in a response to the crisis. And we produced this visual with Ahmed Gharbiye that showcases how all the parties mobilized across territories, highlighting how it was very much aligned on sectarian territories in Lebanon as well. But we also documented all the solidarity response that were happening by other forces, very much associated to the 2019 uprising forces that were also mobilizing to support populations in these times. And we wrote an article, again, I'm not able to show it here, that was published in an academic journal that argues that there was sort of a glass ceiling for these populations that were unable to reach more than 1/3 of the response. Beirut Madinati did 30% of the vote in 2016. Again, here when we counted, we got a 30% again of solidarity response. But we were like, let's acknowledge the fact that there is a 30% or a 1/3 in this among these efforts that are trying to propose another way of providing services, of organizing. So that was during the COVID campaign, and the platform is available for anyone who wants to check this data set. 2020 happened afterwards, the explosion in the Beirut port in on August 4. I have an image of that shows you that the graffiti that was written on the wall next to the port that says, "My government did this." So you imagine that you have it in your heads. It's not showing here. So again, here we mobilized and we did a lot of efforts. It's annoying that it's not showing. I worked hard on the images. So what we did immediately after the explosion is that we distributed our resources very quickly among the four of us. So I was in charge of contacting funders and trying to find resources to get grants and to work on the post-blast reconstruction. We knew that there was no one that's going to carry this. We had a very delegitimized government in the aftermath of 2019 and 2020. We knew that the municipality of Beirut was going to do nothing. And we started receiving calls from the diaspora telling us, what can we do? What can we do? There's money. We want to send you money. How can we help? So we got a generous grant from the IDRC, the Canadian funding agency that helped us organize and recruit and organize the work we wanted to do. We also consulted very quickly with the UNDP and the UN Habitat that also mobilized and reached out to us, because we had by the time become a lab that was a reference point. They knew that we had data sets, they knew we had maps, so they knew we had that urban knowledge about the city. And the neighborhoods affected by the blast were mostly in Beirut. So we consulted for the UNDP, wrote for them a report titled Leaving No One Behind to make sure that the reconstruction would be inclusive. We also consulted with an international organization, nonprofit called ACTED, that wanted knowledge about the neighborhoods affected by the blast, and we authored for them 6 reports on 6 neighborhoods that were the most affected by the blast to inform their response. And we started putting in place the Beirut Urban Observatory, which is mainly made of a number of data platforms or ArcGIS. You see them here. There are 8 of them. I'm going to just show you very quickly a few so we are able to move ahead. So this is the mapping of the damages that we've done at the time with the Order of Engineers and Architects to know which buildings need to be rebuilt. Using the Beirut map that I showed you earlier, it was possible because we had the map. This is a mapping of the building condition that also informed the reconstruction. We also did a mapping of the broken glass 2 years into the blast to know how much was repaired. There is a missing slide. This is a map of the repairs of the NGOs of the repairs done by the NGOs in the affected areas of about 30 NGOs that shared with us their data sets that showed how the reconstruction was done very much by and was led by NGOs. We also worked on the interventions in public and open spaces to show how the reconstruction was not only physical, but took care also of open spaces. And we published these 2 outputs, and an ArcGIS story that is supposed to, that you can consult, but I will let it run here, on how the NGO was led, how the reconstruction was led by NGOs and how it managed to repair most of these neighborhoods 3 years into the blast in relatively successful ways. We also analyzed the platform that was put in place at the time by the World Bank, the UN, and the EU called the 3RF, the Reconstruction, Reform and Recovery Framework. We published that into policy reports and an academic article as well. And the GIS story is more a quick way to telling both stories of the 3RF and the NGO-led reconstruction that you can check very easily on your phones and see that. So you can check it again through our website. We also worked a lot on making the reconstruction people-centered. Oh, now you can see this. I don't know what happened with that WeTransfer link that I sent, but it's all over the place. Okay, these are the reports that were shared. This is the 3RF. This is, okay. And we also did a consultancy with UNESCO on the heritage and Madam Khail and IJMES that was published. We also tried to inspire experts and activists by going back to the Plan Vert of Beirut, which is a study that exists in the drawers of the municipality, and that we transformed into a pilot project for the neighborhoods impacted by the blast, thanks to Habib Dibus, late Habib Dibus, who left us last year. And we designed strategies with the community for public spaces in Karantina and in Madam Khail with a report on Al-Masar Al-Akhdar, a green corridor that would run through Ashrafiyya and replace the highway that is now obsolete. And we're trying with the Muhafiz of Beirut, the governor of the city, to municipalize all these lands and make sure that they're in the public domain. A very slow process, but that we're trying to push through. We also tried to inform the reconstruction of the port of Beirut with the Ministry of Public Works and the World Bank, and held a lot of events at AUB for this. So, the Israeli war started in 2023 in Gaza, and we also accompanied that a project with a first mapping we did tracking the herbicide in Gaza that is led by my colleague Huwaida Al-Harisi, which worked on a series of maps trying to produce a base map for Gaza, again, to inform the reconstruction of Gaza, sitting from Lebanon, but also in consultation with colleagues in Gaza and in Daffa. So we also produced a 3D mapping of Gaza, highlighting the damage and the ecocide and the genocide and the cultural side and all sides that have been happening in Palestine since 2023. All these platforms are available and you can consult them at your own leisure on our website. We also documented the violence in the West Bank by using the data set of ACLED, the Armed Conflict, and I always forget their acronym. So we took these data sets and recoded their instances of attacks, highlighting how settler colonial actions operate versus resistance actions, and to show the disproportionality between settler colonial actions that you see in blue versus resistance action that you see in green. And the yellow actions are the instance of combat that oppose actually both, and that you see that they are very minimal, and you see the disproportionality of the settler colonial interventions. This is another mapping of their geographies in the West Bank, where you see that how all the violence is happening predominantly in the Palestinian inhabited areas, and there's nothing really in the blue areas, which are the Israeli inhabited areas. And again, you see the dots that highlight these incidences and this disproportionality. And again, Ahmed Gharbi, our visualizer and critical mapper, helps us visualize this and these types of graphics and tools that drive the point, I would say, very easily when we want to talk about this or publish this on the socials and help this circulate. The whole idea about all this mapping and this visualization is to debunk the dominant narratives that speak of violence in Gaza as if it's equal violence between two sides. So our tools are through these visuals and these maps and these narratives. We also mapped the Israeli assault along the south border, starting from October 7. So this is a visual that ends in September 13 of last year, where you see, and we mapped in the latter part of the map in black. This is all the assault that happened only between September and over 2 weeks. So you see how in 2 weeks the number of deaths in Lebanon was equal to over a year. Again, the power of these visuals and driving that message of the violence and that disproportionality in attacks. So orange are the total number of strikes that come on Lebanon, and blue is the attacks from Lebanon to occupied Palestine. And these are maps that are updated very regularly, every week or every 2 weeks. And every once in a while, we issue a visual like this that we disseminate on social media, where we have more data to share. After September 2024, when there were forceful displacement of all the Lebanese into Beirut and Mount Lebanon, we launched a data platform on the government-designated shelters, where we uploaded the data set that was shared with us by the Ministry of Social Affairs on how public schools became shelters for the displaced. And we shared this data on our socials and our website for people to know where are the displaced, if they want to support them and give them, provide any form of relief and aid. It was a platform that was very useful for NGOs and for philanthropists and for any mobilization that supported, and any solidarity initiative that supported displaced. We also started documenting the announced strikes of the Israeli spokesman, Avichai something. Everybody in Lebanon calls him Avichai. That's the polite way of calling him. So we started scrapping from Twitter all the tweets that he was posting, asking people to evacuate their homes or the areas. And you see here in that visual, which is the cover of the poster of that talk, where we started documenting because Avichai used to would say that you evacuate your building and the diameter of 500 meters. So we also mapped that diameter to showcase and debunk that narrative that Dahieh is a military site that is legitimate to be bombarded and shot, and to highlight that every circle of 500 meters is overlaid on civilian infrastructures and homes and businesses, and that the whole Dahieh, actually, by the time the war ended on Dahieh, and you see that the largest line at the end was all done in the last 2 days of the bombardment. And you can see the scale and the density and the intensity of these strikes on South Beirut, which we called on purpose South Beirut, not Dahieh, as part of this effort of ours to humanize a narrative that is dehumanizing. We also, in that, there's a base map underneath that is, I think it is now available in open access on our website. If not, it will be available very soon, because it's also part of our work to disseminate these base maps to everyone. We also documented the vital sites in Dahieh, the education facilities and the health facilities, where we reverted the logic of the point and the diameter, where we centered the hospital as a dot and a diameter of 300 meters as a lethal range, because when we did the research, the international law prevents strikes to hit in close vicinity to civilian facilities like hospitals and schools, which was completely not respected by the Israeli assault on Lebanon and on Palestine as well. And here we were trying to support the work of Legal Agenda, which is considering filing lawsuits against Israel and demand reparations. So this is part of the work that would support such filing for lawsuits. We also published a map of Sur, where announced strikes were also published. Whole areas of Sur were published as red zones that needed to be evacuated, including in the archaeological areas. And the base map of Sur is behind us. We also published maps of Nabatiyeh, where very few announced strikes were announced, although a lot of strikes hit Nabatiyeh, and of Baalbek, also to where the whole area was declared like just leave Baalbek at the time. So we also worked while the war was happening with our labbers, our researchers on displacement in Hamra, because many of us are residents of Ras Beirut and Hamra, and documented, should be a video running here. I think maybe it's slow to upload. Yes, so we did a story map on ArcGIS on the displaced who inhabited Hamra. Hamra was a very important neighborhood where displaced came because it is rich in furnished apartment, hotels, available rentals. So a lot of people came and managed to rent, and there were also some squats, a couple, 2 or 3 buildings that got squatted with the help of Amal movement, the political party, the Shia political party that opened buildings forcefully and allowed people to live in them. So we documented these inhabitations, I would say, in the city, building on the work we have on Hamra, because we worked a lot on the neighborhood as a university that lives in that neighborhood and as people who know it pretty well, documenting how vacancy played in the favor of this displacement, and showcasing how another strategy for hosting displaced people could have occurred if we had a more welcoming policy, rather than putting displaced in schools and stopping the educational system from running. We could have thought about matching displaced with vacant apartments, for instance, in Hamra. So this is a GIS story that was published in relation to that. And the PowerPoint that I think I made a mistake probably uploading a wrong version of ends with the current work we're doing in the aftermath of the ceasefire, which is not really a ceasefire. So our work in terms of reconstruction has been very constrained, because we are unable to feel that the war has actually ended for us to start the phase of reconstruction and supporting that reconstruction. But we've decided as a lab to focus on Nabateeh as a locality and try to support the reconstruction process there. So we've been working a lot on the base map of Nabateeh and its layers to be able to share it with the municipality and with stakeholders there and inform their work like we did in the aftermath of the blast, and work with NGOs and other actors on site there. We're also working on rubble. There's a big discussion today in Lebanon about what to do with the millions of tons of rubble that have been produced by the Israeli war. We have 37 villages in the south of Lebanon that are all rubble. And the way we handle rubble in this country is that we throw it in the sea and reclaim land and create future lands to be redeveloped. And we're trying to go against that approach and to foster an approach that's more ecological and environmental, and that could even think to a circular economy of thinking about rubble as a shared resource rather than a resource to be captured by real estate developers or contractors, or and think about how we can make use of existing waste pickers who work a lot with the rubble, who have already removed all the metal scraps from the rubble that is visible and have sold it because there's a market for rubble that's pretty profitable. So we're trying with colleagues at AUB to advocate for this with the Ministry of Environment. Not a lot of echoes, but we're trying to push and at least make this narrative more present, and hoping that in the weeks and months to come, municipalities in the south will find ways to treat and recycle the rubble in situ rather than throw it in their valleys and the rivers like what's done in 2006. Not easy, because we already have a bid that is out there for contractors to take the rubble, and God knows where they're going to throw it. So that's a huge issue for the moment in that early phase of post-war that is not yet a post-war. So with that, I end, and happy to take your questions.